Look, I know the transfer window hasn't opened yet, but it's never too early to practice getting mad at Arsenal for not signing someone. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can bot me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Hello, everybody. Quick intro here. Tomorrow, Clive and I will do the Director of Football pod over on Patreon. Director of Football series has been a fun one. We basically stand in the position Director of Football. We have a set amount that we can spend. Anyone we sell earns us more to spend, and then we pick the players we're going to buy with that money, and we produce a summer of excellence. I think there's no other way to say it. A summer that indeed even Arsenal themselves would be lucky to pull off. Having said that, we don't have to work with agents or get contracts signed or convince people to move or do any of that stuff. But, it's all fun in theory. So we're going to have the Director of Football series. We have a heck of a list of scouting videos lined up that we are going to be bringing you. Gittins, Liao, Nico Williams again, Julian Álvarez, Ali Watkins, El Canus, Xavi Simons, doesn't matter. Mascara, Leroy Sane, because let me tell you, everybody seems to be excited about the Leroy Sane rumors. If you can get a free transfer, a 29-year-old winger on a free, what could go wrong? So we have all of that teed up, and it will change as the news goes. We are also going to do a draft. We're going to do the post-Invincibles draft, get a crew of us together, and we each get a turn to pick and see who can pick the best post-Invincibles team. Good summer nonsense that I think everyone will enjoy. So there's going to be a lot of fun stuff going on over on the Patreon, and then we will have a final end-of-season power rankings where we talk about where the big clubs find themselves going into next season and who we think has the inside track on finishing second to Arsenal next season. Okay, so that's all going to be happening over there. If you use code AVP, you get 50% off the first month. So for a couple of bucks, you get to see what you think, and you can start by listening to the Director of Football pod with Clive tomorrow. There was one club yesterday with Tim and Clive where they shed a mutual tear together over their experience watching the women win the Champions League. So lots of good stuff still to happen. And the Transfer Daily will kick off in June. And it's going to be a busy one because already the rumors are flying around like mad. So very excited for all of that, but also very excited to let you know that there is someone else on this pod today, as much as it pains me not to do it myself. I'm joined by Paul. Hello, Paz.
Woo-hoo.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm really sort of struggling, I think, with how I'm going to manage this summer because the reaction to every rumor and every bit of news that comes out is so extreme and getting more extreme. And it's like I have to try to keep my sanity so that I don't come on here and just knock down straw men and bad faith arguments that are out there. But there's a lot of interest in this summer, understandably. And I think what's hard, and this is true every summer, but I think even more this summer because of the misgivings about the last two windows we've had, is that every time there's a rumor about another club doing something, that's an indictment of us not doing it, and the window hasn't even opened yet. So what's your just sort of early read on the rumors, the news, how this window is going to shake out? Do you think that announcing Zubimendi, for example, very early, like when that little mini window opens in June, might help people a bit? What's your overall read on things?
It'll definitely help. It will not entirely assuage because obviously the thing they feel they're getting burned with is, the striker position. There was an interesting tweet somebody put out. I wanted to have a look at it. I think Connor Hum shared it, but it was like Arsenal's last 9 striker selections or hires that we got over.
They were all home runs, if memory serves, right?
Aubameyang was top of the list. I think Lacazette was. Giroud was second. You must have been applauding that one. Then Lacazette, and I think number 8 was Thierry Henry on loan. It wasn't that impressive, I'll tell you, as a list of strikers. Now, you kind of feel, well, you got to throw in Alexis Sanchez. So some of our attacking talent is off the wings, but still, we don't have a lot of Mo Salahs off the wings to take your mind off the striker thing. We've flirted with a lot of strikers in January windows, in summer windows, and not pulled the trigger on it. There's a lot of pent up frustration. So Zubimendi is a very interesting piece of the puzzle, and at least cuts off it's a bit like, have you won a trophy? It cut off have we signed anybody yet? So it chops that narrative, at least takes 1/3 of the sting out of it. Maybe it takes the total sting out of it, but it's going to be a raw area. We you and I did a little test yesterday evening on audio for today, and we got into areas that got very raw with the cheese grater.
Yeah.
I don't think we should share the full conversation.
To be fair, we talked about a microplane, but there's no need for a microplane because you can use one of our wonderful sponsors, and I think you know who that is. Look, you mentioned Olivier Giroud, so I should at least mention this because it's pretty funny. I was an Olivier Giroud doubter, I have to be honest. I think people know that at this point. He wasn't my cuppa, as they say. But I just celebrated a major birthday in London, as a lot of people know, and someone gave me a really thoughtful, lovely birthday present. It is a signed picture of Olivier Giroud holding the FA Cup aloft. And, so that sits by me when I record now.
Mesut Ozil in the back. That's a good photo.
Mesut Ozil's in the background, but also just out of shot, but enough to know he's there, enough to trigger me even more, is the smiling face of Shkodran Mustafi.
He had a good smile. I mean, say what you like about him.
Yeah, he had a smile that said, "I have no idea what's going on." It makes me think of like the Simpsons thing where they zoom in on his head and there's the monkey with the cymbals, clapping. But good for him. So yeah, look, I think getting Zubimendi done helps. It's a reminder that this is a player that other clubs wanted, other smart clubs wanted, that we've beaten them all to him, and at least it seems that way. And getting him in solves a need that I would say isn't a sexy squad need, but an important squad need, so that we can move on to the things that people want. I mean, we are going to have to buy a backup keeper, and Joan Garcia might be back on the menu with it looking like Man City is no longer in the race there. We are going to have to get a utility defender, maybe a Mascara from Valencia. But nobody's going to care about getting that business done. They're only going to care about who's the forward and how many forwards. And one of the rumors that has popped up that people want to believe, because I think it allows them to confirm that the club are doing the cheapest, least effective thing possible, is Leroy Sané. Leroy Sané is available for free this summer. The wages will certainly not be free, but when you don't have to pay a transfer fee, it more than balances out. There is no denying the numbers he's put up in the Bundesliga, and Mikel would know him from his time at City, but I have to confess it underwhelms. Do you have any reaction to what I think are spurious, but certainly repeated a lot, rumors of Arsenal's interest in Leroy Sané on free?
Yeah, I think certain secondary headlines write themselves. The Leroy Sané to work with and under Arteta again, that's a headline that writes itself. It would be very, very disappointing if before the windows even started, this one actually had some real legs. I mean, sure, if we need somebody to backfill Sterling by the end of the window because we couldn't find anybody else. But again, that's a damning indictment that we couldn't find anybody else. So surely not. Surely that's not. With so much potential ahead of us, so many, a world, an ocean, how many fish in the sea, how many stars in the sky, so many players out there that we could go after. What we know from our existing scouting, recruitment, a data team, Andrea Berta's had all this time in Spain. If we come back from all of that and the answer was Leroy Sané, it'll be very, very disappointing.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because who you sign and the order you sign them in can matter. What I mean by that is, if we were to sign Sesko and Rodrigo and Zubimendi and Mascara and Joan Garcia and also got Sané on a free to be essentially a rotation option with Bukayo Saka and play across the front three when available, I mean, people would be fist pumping the transfer window saying it's an 11 out of 10, right? If we get Mascara and Joan Garcia and Zubimendi and Leroy Sané and nobody else, then it is quite clearly a very poor window that lacks the quality or the numbers that are required. I think it's tough because I do think Sané is a good player, obviously. He's obviously a good player. There's just something about getting a 29-year-old on a free that's not going to wash with people and doesn't look like getting the work done that needs to be done. Because, I mean, it bears pointing out that Raheem Sterling and Leroy Sané will be almost identical ages at the start of the season of when we would have gotten them, if you follow what I'm saying. So, like, Sterling was 29 and 2/3 when we got him, and Sané would be roughly the same thing. if he were to come and when the season starts. Now, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, on top of the kind of age curve, etc., there's the ambition curve, which is you want, like, whatever you say, this team has been very locked in on trying to build, become better, do something. I'm not sure Sané coming in convinces us, the team, really anybody, that this is the career move, that where he's putting the cherry on top, where he's going one more level. Is that how he sees this? I just don't think, after being where he's been at Bayern Munich, at Man City, coming here feels like that late stage career move of there was nothing better going on. This was a club that's kind of got some status from his perspective, but not all the status he's looking for. So it just feels a little underwhelming for him, and therefore a little underwhelming for us. We're building. I'm not sure he's in the building mode. So
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Just to compare also again with Sterling. Sterling had played 1,978 minutes at Chelsea the season before he joined us. Sané is coming off 1,637 minutes. Sterling had just had 8 goals and 4 assists in the league at Chelsea before joining us, where he had no goals. And Sané is on 11 goals and 5 assists. So there are comparisons to be made there. Look, Leroy Sane is a very good player who has produced at pretty much every stop he's made, both at Bayern and at City, and has never been anything other than a very good player. Availability would be a question, but I just think getting a soon-to-be 30-year-old on a free is not going to get anybody happy. And again, I don't think this is what we're going to do, but I think it is an example of how it's going to be hard to navigate the summer, because we will be linked to every reasonably available, gettable forward on the market. If I was Sané's agent, of course I'd say Arsenal are interested. It's the first club I'd say are looking, because he knows Arteta and we need a forward, and it just creates a market for him. So we're going to, unfortunately, or fortunately, if you find this stuff fun, Paul, be linked to every available forward this summer.
We are. And as I say, that's definitely one that writes itself as a headline. I'd be weirded out if they didn't say Sané to Arsenal. But I do think it's also instructive when you think about him, because there's two sides to the game. And the defensive tracking back piece is kind of the classic thing you would always talk about, but there's maybe 3 sides to the game, which is the defensive work rate, the pressing. I mean, you want a guy who's going to be hyper aggressive, available to press, and I just don't think you can assume that with Sané, and at that age profile, game in, game out, the level of press we're looking for from at least 2 of 3 of our attacking players across every game. The intensity, you're looking for a guy who's going to bully back lines with his work rate, and that's I think we got to measure every attacker we're looking at. Do they increase the intensity of our press? Not will they do some work?
Yeah, and again, if this was a move that we made, I would be inclined to say it's a really poor decision by the club and a real lack of ambition. That would be my instinct. Again, if it was the third forward that we signed, then yeah, you can have basically any third forward you want if you got the first 2. But it does look like the kind of move that we should know not to make, based on the very same kind of move we made last summer that didn't work out. So yes. We'll just have to see.
And we have to be careful of damning the club for things they're thinking. But we're not even thinking about that.
That's the problem. We are going to spend this summer talking about links that are real and links that are not real. We will never totally know which is which, and there will be an instinct to damn the club. I mean, look, I don't like to use social media as an indication of anything, but I'll use it just as an indication of how far down the rabbit hole you can go. I mean, there are people losing their minds that we're signing Sané on a free as our forward signing, and the window isn't even open. So it's not going to get any better. Another name that's come up, though, is Julian Álvarez. This is a little more interesting. Atleti are an interesting club because they will spend big on players. They will also then sell those players on for big money, and in some instances quite quickly if they can. Sometimes they're in a phase of spending. Sometimes they're in a phase of selling. And if they decide they're ready to move on from a player, they're pretty quick to sell. I mean, I had a chance to speak to an athletic expert when we were linked with Berta at first. And if you want to hear that, by the way, on the Patreon, it's a really, really fascinating conversation about Berta's time at Atleti. But Paul, the Julian Álvarez links are more interesting because he is a very different type of forward than Gyokeres or Sesko, for example, or even Ekitike. So is that one that would move you? Is that one that rings truer to you? I would think that Mikel would have a reasonable knowledge of him, and certainly Berta would have a good knowledge of him. So is it 2 + 2 = 22 or 2 + 2 = 4?
I think he'd be fantastic. I'd be all for that one. And I'm sure Arteta and Berta would strongly look at that. But there's got to be absolutely no chance, surely, that that's a possibility. Unless they're looking for something a little different and we pay a lot of money and they say, great, we actually want to go in a different direction. But, I mean, he'd be brilliant. I was, when he left...
Is he the type of forward we need?
Let's
put it this way. He's roughly my height. Sadly, not my weight, but that's another story.
No, he's not. He's definitely different every other profile we're looking at. But he's one of those that he's great. And you maybe change a little bit how... Could we play with him in our team? Absolutely. Would he be a really effective attacker for us? I can't see why he wouldn't be. Is he different to the profile we were actually looking for? Yeah. But we can adapt. He certainly fits in the style of play that City had, that we can have. We have had at times. And he's just class. He raises your level substantially. I've no idea why Atletico Madrid would sell him. If you cast your mind back to when he left City, and he wasn't happy there, wasn't getting played enough. He wanted to do something different. I'm thinking, he's going off to Atletico Madrid. Let me check the price. I guess they were having to sell him off cheap, and they sell him off for a whopping fee of, I don't know what it was, like 75 million. I'm like, wow, they got incredible money for that guy. Not that obviously he's turned out to be well worth that and some, and to have fulfilled his potential. But I was very surprised at the nature of the deal. I always thought it was going to be a bit of a discount, we need to get rid of this guy. The City certainly showed how you do that, getting their money's worth, but he's fulfilled that and more. And Atletico paid very good money. But, maybe there's things behind the scenes that Berta might know, and maybe there's some legs to it. I'd love this one to have legs where the Sané one does not.
It's an interesting one for me because it's a very different type of striker than the ones we've been linked with. And I think we kind of intuitively know that Mikel wants a big striker if he can find him. This would be more the Gabriel Jesus mold. It's an interesting one, though, because I think he could play well with Kai Havertz, for example.
Yeah.
If you wanted to have Kai up, not Kai up front, but sort of Kai in that 8 and Julian Álvarez at the 9, and the way they could sort of swap and exchange. I think that is an interesting prospect. I also think, and this is based on nothing, but maybe he could play off the left at times as well. Being a right footer and I just think his physical characteristics would suit us there. The reality, though, is that he's going to be, I presume, very, very expensive. So it's a question of whether you want to sink all the resources into that. But you look at the alternatives, and that's where you get back to the Gyokeres Sesko stuff. And the reporting seems to be that between Berta and Mikel, there's some kind of debate about whether it should be Gyokeres or Sesko. And I'm curious how much of the reporting on that interest is true. And I tend to think that if Mikel had a strong preference for one versus the other, that would be the one we would go for. Do you buy into the argument that maybe Berta's a little more interested in Gyokeres and Mikel's a little more interested in Sesko? I certainly think it would be weird, by the way, to pivot from Sesko being your first choice to Julian Álvarez, because they're such different players that it would be a weird indication that you don't have a clear idea of what you want from that position. So that alone gets my spidey senses up on the Álvarez rumors. But what do you think of the Gyokeres versus Sesko stuff?
Well, I think it'd be very healthy if Berta and Arteta come at it from two different angles. I'm not saying that they disagree. They won't be disagreeing, right? They're coming into this looking to forge a relationship and understanding a way of working together. So they're going to have a really good discussion about it. And you want somebody on the other side of it who's bringing it that other perspective. They're quite different players, as I understand them. They're both physical. They're so they can both generally handle themselves, but
Sesko much better in the air. Gyokeres much more of a facilitating player, able to bring others into the game than Sesko. That's my take. We've done scouting videos on both of them. By the way, we've done multiple scouting videos on both of them, and my take is that inside the width of the goal, Sesko is a much more powerful and effective player. Outside the width of the goal or outside of the box, Gyokeres has him beat by a lot. When you look at the data, though, this is where you got to decide what to make of the Portuguese league. Because if all you care about is data, I mean, there is absolutely no contest. This is a blowout, right? Gyokeres dominates him in shots at over 4 per 90. He dominates him in XG more than double what he gets. He dominates him in XA more than 3 times what he gets. He outperforms him in goals. He outperforms him in assists. Again, I fully acknowledge that you have to decide how much you want to discount that and the relative strength between the Portuguese league and the Bundesliga, not to mention that Sesko is, 20? So there's a development arc here as well. And then you have to decide, do we want a guy who's just a big, leaping giant inside the width, the width of the post inside the box? So it's a slight style difference. There's no comparison on the numbers, but you have a league comparison issue there as well.
You do. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces there. So one of the reasons you might look at, say, Álvarez is because of the quality of his finishing. I mean, he's a killer. He'll get you goals you weren't expecting to get from that position, from that situation. And each player is different here. Gyokeres gets lots of goals. How well does it translate to the Premier League is going to be one question. The second question is, to your point about the width of the goal, in general, in the attacking area, he tends to push out to the wings, right? You picture him kind of peeling off to the left wing. I mean, that can work. If you've got Martinelli on the left wing and he swings inwards to the attacking spot, but he's not a guy himself who dominates that central area, whereas Sesko likes that area in the middle. He's, 22 now? Coming through?
Sesko?
Yeah.
21.
21.
I believe it's 21.
Yeah, 21 going to 22. What was interesting was, so I used to...
Everyone who's 21 is going 22. Although, all right, I'm going to forgive you there,
Paul,
because
he's about to
his birthday is in
July.
2 days. So
okay.
It's in 2 days. So yeah, he is very much going, but he's 21 until he's 22. That's how it works.
Sure. But in striker years, this is it, right? If you look at Isak, 21, 22, 23 was when he turned into a guy with massive end product. And I think his 21 year was better than his 22 year, but 23 totally broke out. So you could see it. I remember when I was looking at tape, as they used to say, of Martin Odegaard, and you keep seeing him at Real Sociedad with Isak, and Isak didn't look all that at the time. He was bloody young. I mean, he was 20, 21, and I couldn't quite see it because they formed quite the two, doing the pressing thing. Like, they really were a kind of partnership. Odegaard often looked like a second striker off him, and he looked good, but he didn't totally catch the eye. And it's right at that age. Now, he probably did to many aficionados out there, but just didn't leap off the page entirely that this guy was about to turn into a worldie. Sesko's at that really interesting stage where I think he's got loads of talent, loads of finesse. I think he'd be a great player. The end product isn't there yet in the way it is with Gyokeres, with the way it is with Álvarez. But outside of end product, and like who needs end product from a striker, I think he'd be my preference out of those two players in terms of how he plays. Just absolute quality. And so, if those are the guys in the frame, that's the decision to make. Do you think Sesko on top of our other options? And that's the thing, we have other options. We have Kai Havertz. So you can leave a little space. Maybe that if you're Arteta, you say, well, I think this could be the year Sesko breaks out, but we've got Kai Havertz and we can do a bit of mix and match and play together and get goals one way or another. We have shown that we can get goals without a killer striker. That shouldn't be the plan, but our previous season, we knocked it out of the park on goals. So there are ways of getting there if Arteta sees it that way.
It's the real weird conundrum of the Arsenal attacking issue that I think everybody who's watched Arsenal gets the feeling we need a killer, we need a finisher, we need someone who, scores goals from nothing and takes half chances. But you have to acknowledge that Arsenal have been the biggest XG overperformer in the league for about 3 seasons running. Now, I think, and I don't know this to be the fact, but I think set piece goals is the answer to a lot of that XG overperformance. So that changes things quite a bit. Any way you strike it, though, when you have the first season since the 1920s where no one scored over 9 goals in the team, you need a goal scorer. Now, you said something I just want to clarify, because you said Sesko's end product isn't at the Gyokeres level yet. Sesko's end product will never be at the Gyokeres level. And just so we're clear, neither will Gyokeres if he leaves Portugal. If you think Gyokeres could be a 50-goal scorer outside of Portugal, you buy him yesterday. Because Sesko's never going to be a 50-goal scorer, just as Gyokeres is never going to be a 50-goal scorer outside of Portugal. I think the question is, will Sesko be a scorer on par with Gyokeres when you control for league strength? And that's where I think there is an interesting issue, because to be fair to Sesko, his end product is actually pretty good right now. Here's a pretty wild thing. Hugo Ekitike is number 1 in the Bundesliga. Number 1. In non-penalty expected goals per 90. Number 1. Benjamin Sesko is number 24. He has, less than half the XG per 90, non-penalty, that Ekitike has. Now, here is a wild stat for those of you that don't want us to get another soft-shooting bad finisher. Benjamin Sesko had 10 expected goals this season and scored 13 goals. Hugo Ekitike had 21 and a half expected goals this season and scored 15 goals.
He's a bum.
Well, he's not a bum, but that is, just to put in perspective, he had 11 and a half more expected goals and managed 2 more actual goals. He's just not a good finisher, and that feels a little bit sticky with Ekitike. And so with Sesko, I do think the case is he's going to get on the end of things with his head. He's going to be good in the box. He is an excellent finisher. Both he and Gyokeres kick the ball incredibly hard, incredibly accurately from all different angles. So if you like Kai Havertz, and I do, and you just feel we need to roll the dice on someone who could be an elite goal scorer for us and add goals from situations where we don't currently get them, I think Gyokeres and Sesko are both interesting options. The thing I really like about Gyokeres, though, that tends to be reasonably sticky between leagues is the number of shots he takes. He's over 4 shots per 90. And I do think that we tend to have a Goldilocks mentality to the way we take shots. I want it on my left. I want it, I want a little more space. It's a crowded box. I do like a guy who will just hit the ball hard from all angles 4 times a game in the box. Because even if it doesn't go in, I think that gives you a reasonable chance at finding a goal from somewhere. And these shot monster strikers tend to be the strikers that you want at your club. And, I like Kai Havertz, but I think he's, I want to say under 2 shots per 90 or in that zone. So, and I'll look that up because someone will come back to me and say, no, well, actually he's this. So Kai Havertz, just to be clear, shots per 90, 2.54, 2.32 last season when he played more games. So that's not bad, but it's not 4. It's not 4.5. And if Gyokeres could do that in the Premier League, that would be really interesting. So these are the kinds of debates we're going to be having all season.
Can I ask you?
All summer. Yeah, go ahead.
So right now, kind of, do you like both options? Like, if we went one way or the other, do you like them?
Yeah. I don't want to repeat stuff I said just a couple of days ago when I spoke to Clive on the pod, but I will say this. I am going to this is my biggest take about this summer. And this isn't me punting to the club or appealing to authority or anything like that. I don't know that there's a sure thing striker target out there not named Alexander Isak, and I don't think he's moving. So if the club decides it's Sesko or Gyokeres or Ollie Watkins or Alvarez, whoever they decide, I'm going to be open to that working because I'm not going to pretend I know if Sesko is better than Gyokeres or Gyokeres better than Sesko, for example. I can't pretend that I know that. Ollie Watkins, I know he'd be good, but could Sesko or Gyokeres be great? Maybe. And so I think where I'm going with this, Paul, is to say, if the club does the business I regard as necessary, keep backup keeper, utility defender, Zubamendi, and 2 attackers. If they do that business, I'm going to come out of the summer saying, mission accomplished. Now let's see how those attackers work out. Because, look, there are definitely players I don't want us to go for. And there have definitely been situations where I have been skeptical of signings. I was skeptical of the Marino signing, for example. But I don't pretend to know for sure which of the strikers that are out there would definitely work for us. I think it's a really hard position to predict. Very smart clubs, and very dumb clubs, by the way, have struggled to get their forward signings right. Last summer, Liverpool couldn't find anyone. They got Chiesa in, right? We couldn't find anyone when we got Sterling. United, Sancho, Antony, Højlund, Xerxes, a small fortune spent to find nothing. Everybody liked the Pedro Neto signing for Chelsea. He has not been good. He has not been good. I think at one point this season he had 1 goal and it was that screamer against us, naturally. But he hadn't done anything.
That's so surprising, though, isn't it? I mean, I didn't every one of us say, yeah, I'd love him. The only concern is fitness.
Yeah, he stayed fit and he still wasn't good. But this is the point, right, Paul, which is this area of the pitch, which is so important, can be so hard to solve for. And no matter how much you think you know who's going to be the good player, I think it's a lot harder than people expect. You know, Leandro Trossard, for me, by the way, is a really savvy example of a signing where we spent a reasonable amount of money on a player in the league and got a reasonable return. I think that stuff is easier to do. You know, if we signed Brian Mbeumo, I think he would do a nice job for us. But if you're trying to find the answer, quote unquote, at striker, and you're going to spend 80 or 90 million on that position, I think at best you're going to wind up with a 50-50 coin toss on whether it hits the way you need it to. Now, if you're trying to protect your downside, by the way, I think you go for Gyokeres only because I have a hard time seeing Gyokeres just being worthless. He's got enough skills. He's in his prime. He's physical. He shoots a lot. He can, play in different areas of the attacking third and combine. Sesko could just be a donkey. Like, he could be in the Nunez class of like, yeah, he runs fast and he jumps high and he kicks the ball hard. But you know what? Like, he doesn't have the close control. He doesn't have the game reading. He doesn't have the finesse to his game, and he can't make it happen. Now, to be fair, Sesko's a finisher and Darwin isn't. But I guess what I'm trying to say...
Can I say, Elliot?
Yeah, please.
Like, I object to that because you can look in Darwin's eyes. Like, as soon as you look in his eyes... No, you see donkey, right? There's a donkey staring back at you.
Well, I rated him, Paul. I mean, I'm the donkey, too, because I was taken in by his incredible pace, physicality, how hard he kicked the ball.
All true. But you didn't look in his eyes because you would have seen a donkey looking back at you. Like, he's got like, you can almost see the ears when he looks straight back at you.
See, I don't see donkey. I see madness. That's what I see. But, teach their own. Look, I guess where I'm going with this, and it was a long ramble, so I want to tie it up.
I liked it.
Is essentially, you, dear listener, may have a strong opinion of who the right signing is. And that's what we should do. It's fun to have an opinion, right? And I tell all the people who are like, oh, you think you know better than the sporting director? You think you know better than the coach? No, I don't think I know better. But I'm entitled to my opinion. That's why we're all here. But I want to acknowledge that I find this particular window and the need we have at striker very hard for me to easily fill with a player that I feel certain is the right guy, Isak notwithstanding. So, you know what, Paul? If it's Sesko, I'm not going to be sat here going, it should have been Gyokeres. If it's Gyokeres, I'm not going to be sat here saying it should have been Sesko. And if that player we get in doesn't work out, I'm going to come back and say they got the wrong guy, but they had to take a shot on one of these guys. And I will, just so we're clear, so I don't do post hoc analysis. You can play this back to me later. I don't think it's clear which is the right guy. Yeah. And I hope we get that one. But if we don't, I am not going to come back on this podcast and pretend I knew which the right guy was. Does that make sense?
It does. I can see, you know what, I can see Gyökeres being an answer if you're an Atletico Madrid. Mind you, they play a lot of more possession football than you think they do, but they certainly have that in them that they can be...
Sit and counter.
Yeah, and kind of in the attacking end, be a little more free form because they're running into space. And that's, for me, that's Gyökeres, right? Sesko is closer to the problem we often solve, which is we're doing the semicircle of death around a sat-in defence or a mid-block where you want the run-in, and certainly Gyökeres has the run-in behind, but you want the guys central, the other players to work off. Like, I do lean at the moment, Sesko, assuming that we see that upward curve when we watch him, and I want to watch more of him to see, is this the season the 22 to 23-year-old season? Well, okay, going 21 to 22. But in striker years, is it the 22 to 23-year-old season when you start producing the end product? Will he ever have that end product? I mean, the bit I've seen so far, he's, and maybe it's a bit too highlighty, but he certainly seems to have the ability, the technique, and he's the kind of player I'd like to see us build off and around. So that's if the team sees that he's ready to pop to where, okay, they don't know what level of end product, but it's going to get up that next level where he's a real contender for one of the better finishers as a striker, then for me it's Sesko because of how he plays and his style. I think he's more he's much closer to the fit that we would look for as a template.
Yeah. Okay, I want to move on to Thierry Henry's comments that he made on the overlap. Get some of your thoughts on that. I want to briefly touch on Max Dowman going bonkers again, this time for England. I do want to just quickly say a word of thanks and gratitude, because we express gratitude, I think, a lot on this podcast, but it doesn't mean you stop doing it when someone or something has brought you joy. And I think it's a good habit to get into, to always express your gratitude when it exists, right? That's just a good thing to do. Don't ever get tired of saying thank you. So I want to say thank you to Manchester United, who are committed to just extending the misery of their miserable season by flying the day after the season ended out to Malaysia to lose without scoring a goal in Malaysia. That's commitment to the bit. That is incredible commitment to the bit. And I want to thank them for it. Okay, we're going to talk about other clubs moving. Chelsea for Delap. Is Liverpool, are Liverpool getting Verts, or are they getting gazumped for Verts? We'll talk Henry, we'll talk Dowman. That'll be the balance of the show. But it would be wrong to do that without at least telling you how to build an e-commerce business, because you're sat there saying, I want to build an e-commerce business, and I haven't told you how. How can I be doing my job if I haven't told you how to build your e-commerce business? So you do it with Shopify. Shopify is, look, it's really this simple. If you have a product you want to sell, if you have an artwork product or a crafts product or a food product or whatever it is, t-shirts, and you want to sell something, the thing you expect is, I'd love to have a website that looks really professional, that takes the burden off me to have to figure out how to do tax and shipping stuff or cart optimization stuff that you don't even want to know. What does that mean? Oh, when it's in your cart, do they get a message saying, hey, you left something in your cart? And I need that product to also be available on places like Facebook Marketplace and on Instagram and TikTok Shop and stuff like that. That's what Shopify does. You write the descriptions of your product, you put the pictures in, you pick the layout you like. It takes care of all that other stuff. So we've established in 2025 as a nice ring to it. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ArsenalVision, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ArsenalVision to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/ArsenalVision. Do it now. And if you're in the UK, Europe, or Australia, it's time to get the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra in the white hot special edition colorway. This isn't just a pretty lawnmower, though. It is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, built to handle your most sensitive areas. reducing the risk of nicks and cuts and irritation where it matters most. It is this simple. If you groom below the waist, then you need the best below the waist grooming product. That is not an area where you say, I'll just use whatever's in the shower. I'll just use whatever's cheap on an e-commerce site. You get the best product. This has the foil blades, so you can go completely smooth. It has the skin-safe technology and ceramic blades, a long battery life. It works in the shower. And if you want it in the white hot edition, you can get that now in the UK, Europe, and Australia, or you can just get the regular color like I have it here in the US. So white hot looks smooth results. The white hot 5.0 Ultra brings the heat without cooking your skin. It's sleek, easy to use, and way less terrifying than whatever you were using before. Use code ArsenalVision for 15% off your entire order at manscaped.com. That's 15% off with the code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. Stay cool, stay smooth, and leave the burns to the sun. And finally, look, NordVPN. Get it, use it, done. That simple, right? You want to sign up for a streaming service that's cheaper in other countries than the country you're in? VPN to that country, sign up there. Instead of paying $12 a month, you pay $9 a month. Okay. You do that for a couple of services. You save, I don't know, $15, $20 a month. Just VPNing other places, signing up there. That's not a bad deal, right? Not to mention when someone says, oh, you got to watch this video, and says, you can't watch this video, it's geo-locked. Or you want to watch the 3 p.m. kickoffs, but they're blacked out. They're not blacked out everywhere. So get NordVPN, you put it on whatever device you want, you click where you want to browse, and immediately your device acts as though it's browsing in that area. Grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus 4 additional months on top. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision. Do it now. Paul? Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Okay, super quick on the Dowman thing.
Yeah.
Because I just think it's worth mentioning. I think this is where clubs get into a really tricky position, right? Because everybody wants signings and everybody wants the kids to get a chance. And you are expected to compete for every trophy, but you're expected to rotate so people stay fit. But in rotating, you're expected not to crash out of certain cups. So, no pressure. Play the kids in the League Cup, but don't crash out. Sign the best players, but keep a path for Nwaneri and Dowman and Miles Lewis-Skelly. No pressure. Simple. Well, it's not simple. The only thing that solves that demand is you win things, and when you win things, people forgive you. But the way you win things is also to make sure that if you have a prodigal talent coming through, they have a path to come through. Because whether it's Trent Alexander-Arnold at Liverpool, or Harry Kane at Spurs, or Bukayo Saka at Arsenal, whatever it is, having a piece like that of the puzzle solved by your academy changes your life, changes your destiny. In Kane's situation, changes nothing, but leave that aside. So what do you think about what you're seeing with Dowman? Because it's the kind of thing where this isn't a secret anymore. Beyond Arsenal circles, people are noticing that this is a prodigal young talent, and he's going to be coming on our summer tour. So he's gonna have a chance to show what he's made of.
Yeah. This might be the biggest test we've seen yet of a young guy who's absolutely brilliant. But if you play him in the Premier League, okay. Getting ahead of ourselves here, but even looking over the next 2 years, if you play him in the Premier League, he may quickly be found wanting just because that's the gulf, mainly in physicality, but also week in, week out in intensity. On the other hand, he needs to be involved, and at youth level, he's going to soon find himself frustrated that he's not getting a chance to show his wares and to be important. And the way the game's structured at the moment, there's no real path to joining youth players on a trajectory beyond kind of under 18s and then under 21s, which is a long way off in terms of prestige and trajectory to being in the Premier League. There's no B team kind of effect. So it's basically he'll have the summer tour this year, next summer. He'll begin to get involved in the cups coming off the bench this year. Next year, he'll start in the cups. I mean, I'm just drawing up a rough trajectory. Or he could absolutely be at such a level that next season, not the coming one, the one after, he starts to be an actual factor in starting games, kind of like the Nwaneri season where we just had. But this might be more challenging because the eye test tells me, I watched quite a bit in Nwaneri as you can over the internets as he was coming through, and like Max Dowman just looks more ready, more like game in, game out. He's pulling the strings. He can, seems like he's Messi-esque in terms of he just seems to be able to do whatever he wants to do. And again, it's small sample size, small amount of air quotes tape to watch there, but I think he may cause I'm not saying who's the bigger talent, but as you see him coming through the youth setup, he's more asking the question, how does he play an important role for the club beyond youth football at this tender age of, is he 15 going on 16?
15. Yeah, he'll be 16 December.
So it feels like he's going to ask the question earlier than Waneri, and therefore be smaller. It's not Cesc Fabregas coming into the Premier League at that time. Teams are just so much more set up to clog the midfield effectively, not just in terms of size and physicality, just their structure. There's so little place, and Waneri's discovered that now. Brilliant player, but teams know how to shut down. Once they know about you, once they see you as a factor, they know how to close down your space. And then you've got a year of adjusting to that, and his dynamic in the team, like he can run the show at the moment as Dowman at the youth level. He can do whatever he wants. Well, you don't get to do that in the Premier League. You need to play for the rest of the team. You need to distribute, need to create. Most of the time, your brilliance is getting the pass off to a guy in a better spot, which is not Dowman's role at the moment in youth football. He's got a lot of transitioning to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch him play for England the other day, he had a sensational assist where he sort of bounced off a few other midfielders and then played the ball between a cavernous gap between the center backs for a goal for England. Let's put it this way. If you take Lamine Yamal as the current apotheosis of young talent being ready for senior men's football early, he started 22 games for Barcelona at the age of 16. Max Dowman will be 16 in the middle of this upcoming season. If you think he is a Lamine Yamal-esque talent, and I think that would be overstating things based on what we know. It doesn't mean he couldn't be, but there's only one Lamine Yamal. It would still be very early for him to play any kind of big role in the first team next season. Could he have a role? I mean, maybe in the League Cup. I don't know. Maybe he can play some minutes in the Premier League. The thing that's hard is you don't want to lose this player. And as we know, at that age range, it's easy for clubs to come in and pick off those players by making bigger promises. So you have to be careful to kind of encourage the player that their future is in the right hands and in the right place at Arsenal Football Club, which I think we'll be able to do. And
I think you've made this point, Elliot, which is, like, if you're a winger, it's a little bit more of an individualist contribution. Like Lamine Yamal doesn't need to make the whole team tick, whereas Max Dowman's probably going to come into a central midfield attacking role, a kind of an 8-10 thing, and the team's more important than him in terms of his decision-making, whereas if he's coming off the wing, you might be a prodigy at 17, and it's 70% about your game, 30% about how you connect with the rest of them. The Max Dowman role will, after his first game or two where people aren't expecting him and now they're ready for him, it'll be 80-90% how he connects to the rest of the team, 10% about how brilliant he is when they allow him a little space, because he won't be allowed a little space.
Yeah, the thing where we can probably agree, and this is what's really hard, I don't think he's getting much out of the level he's playing at now, because he is able to pass the ball straight through 10 players to an on-rushing attacker, or he is able to dribble his way past an entire team and score. If you watch the goalie scores at the byline where he just beats 3 or 4 guys and slots it through the keeper from an acute angle, it's hard not to get excited about this player. I think he's an insane talent. But if he's going to continue to develop, which is what we want him to do, he's going to have to play at a higher level than this. I just think it's clear. And look, I'm not a close watcher, but even from the highlights, you can tell he doesn't find that level challenging enough. He's not being confronted with enough challenge. Now, what I will say is the loan market world has changed. Star talents tend not to go out on loan. Loans tend not to be, incredibly effective anymore, at least as far as I can tell. Do you want to loan a player out like this so they can get some senior men's football and be tested at that level? Or do you want to keep him at home? I'd be more inclined to keep the player at Arsenal, but Max is probably going to have to play at a higher level, and that'll be the challenge for Arsenal to figure out how to continue his development, because he looks like he's on the glide path to superstardom, but we've seen other players at this age group not live up to their potential. So we'll see, but it's very exciting, and it's going to be fun to watch him in preseason. Like, preseason always has something fun for us, and I think Max Dowman looks like he could be the really exciting part of this preseason. Let's move on. I do want to touch on one thing before we get to the Henry interview, and that's just other clubs moving. Chelsea look like they're going to get Liam Delap. Do you think that's a miss, not being in for Delap? It's a really reasonable fee for a Premier League proven player who's young and looks pretty exciting. Are you surprised that that's not one that we were on the case for?
Wouldn't it be a bit underwhelming?
I don't know. Some people really, really rate him, and at his age, for what he's doing, playing a position we need in the Premier League, like, he looks like an exciting option.
Yeah, but his last name's Delap, and
there is that. Yep, there is that.
His dad was really good at throw-ins.
22 years old. He had 12 goals for Ipswich this season on 9.3 expected goals. Also 2 assists to go with that, but assists not a huge part of his game. The season before at Hull, he played 2,200 minutes in the Championship and had 8 goals and 2 assists. So he stepped up to the Premier League and looked pretty comfortable at Premier League level in a team that obviously was not very good. Because I always like to talk about shooting, he managed 2.29 shots per 90 at Ipswich. Again, a team that's not particularly good. So the underlying metrics are interesting for a 22-year-old. I mean, 22 isn't super young, but by striker standards, I think that's pretty early in his development. You compare that against 22-year-old Sesko, and his numbers look okay by comparison, and the fee is a lot less, and he's been in the Premier League.
Yeah, well, he's what I would term a trap signing, right?
For someone who doesn't understand a trap game, I'm very curious to hear what a trap signing is.
I don't understand what a trap signing is, but seeing as I invented the term, it's going to be hard for you to argue with me. He's the striker you may be tempted to get, while you should really be going for that just half a level above him. And like, again, it's the snow globe. The snow globe needs to settle so you see who the player is. He's right at that age. It's once again the 22-year-old striker. What comes next at 23, 24? You're plotting the little curve. What does he push on to? Like, I do think he's very good. I could see why we would have gone for him in January or whatever, as the guy who was available, who was very good on the way up, and then you get to see him for that half a season and during summer and work out if he's the guy you want to take going forward. But he does feel like that, potentially that half level down. And yes, I'm biased because the last name is Delap, and it just seems so gosh darn ordinary. And when you look at him, his demeanor is kind of gosh darn ordinary, but he's a very good player. I don't think he's one who sets us alight in terms of sizzle, which is, you're looking for a couple of things from a striker. Ultimately, you want somebody who's very, very effective. But when you're in the signings phase, there's also the bit of sizzle that comes from the guy, the bit of the unknown, and somehow he feels very known, even though who knows what his future would be. So yeah, I'd find it a little unexciting. But yeah, he's very good.
Yeah, look, just so I get on the record, I wasn't super excited about Liam Delap, and if that was our signing, I'd say, like, okay, I get it. It makes sense. It's a reasonable value for what he is. It doesn't light my fire, but as I said earlier in this pod, I can't pretend to know who's going to solve that position. Like, if you fast forward 3 seasons from now and tell me, here's the guy that moved clubs in the summer of 2025 who went on to be one of the big striking talents in the Premier League, I don't think I'd have a chance to necessarily guess the right answer there. So it is what it is. I think we should move on to our final topic, which I want to spend just a little time on, which is Thierry Henry and his comments. Henry was on the overlap, and it was a long conversation that covered a lot of ground. So let's be clear. He didn't go on the overlap to blast Arsenal and Arteta. He spoke for almost an hour and a half with them about everything from his upbringing and the clubs he played for and his time at Monaco, his time at Juve, his time at Arsenal, and coaching. Does he want to get back into coaching? So it was a long-ranging interview, and it's easy to have pull quotes from it and make it look like you went on there to just talk about Arsenal and Arteta. That's not the case. But he did go into the idea. I'll give you a couple quotes here. Quote, Manchester United have played in 5 finals in the last 5 years. The United that everybody laughs at. Whereas for Arsenal, in the last 3 years of building, they've not reached a final. So I do understand when people ask the question, surely you should compete for a trophy. I'm not saying that I'm disappointed with Arsenal, but it's normal that people are raising questions now about what the team is doing. There's some other quotes that I can pull in later, but I'm curious your reaction to sort of Henry questioning the failure to reach finals, to get trophies, and the importance of trophies as a metric for success.
Well, that's the thing. You can go with Henry questioning it, and certainly that would be the headlines that are written from this, and I think he's smart enough, at the media savvy enough to know those are the headlines that come from it. What he actually said, as you said, I'm not saying this season was a disappointment, but it's normal that people are raising questions about what this team is doing. So, if you start there and then have a discussion about, Man United and this and that and the other, you're reading the tea leaves. What is he really saying? What he says is quite reasonable. I guess he's saying it because he also tends to lean that way, that, it's time to have won something, to be winning something. And of course, we need to recognize we've had a Community Shield, we've had an FA Cup. And so we have some stuff, but cups-wise, and then there's a cup. I think the way cups go are you take a pragmatic approach in the first couple of rounds, you try and win your games. If you get into a good spot in the FA Cup and the Community or the Carabao Cup, then you push on and start taking it seriously around the last 2 rounds going into the final, and you take your shot at it. And it's kind of, if you end up in that position, you go for it. And I think we generally have done. But I think we also tend to say, look how stretched this team was this season. I mean, my God, we were running on fumes. We were trying to compete for the Premier League, certainly through Christmas, New Year, January, February. We were in the Champions League. We were stretched. We were losing key players. It's like, what do you want to do in terms of the cups? Do you really want to put even more strain on your starting team? Or do you take a pragmatic approach, which I think we did? I don't really question our approach. I would have been, I think, more upset had we loaded the eggs into the domestic cups basket rather than prioritizing the league and the Champions League, which is really how a club measures itself. It's a conundrum set up by the modern football game that, what's Arteta said, how thin the squad is for the demands of football at the moment. Something's got to give, and if you don't think something's got to give, I don't think you're living in the real football world. Arteta wants a deeper squad, a stronger squad. He wants to compete in the cup. That was certainly he's seen that at Manchester City, right? Pep will always go for the cups, but he'll also make pragmatic rotation decisions in the earlier stages of those cups. That's just what it is. It hasn't fallen our way in terms of the cups. I think our performance in the Premier League generally has been really strong and building over the last few years, apart from this year, which, there's a lot to be said about the Premier League and the challenges we faced. And if you look at our build in Europe, Europa League, Champions League going out last year, a round or so earlier, semi-finals, hotly contested, beating Madrid in the quarterfinals, you can make a very strong case that in the most important competitions, we're making progress. Conversation to be had about the Premier League this year for context, but being a serious contender, coming second 3 times in a row in the Premier League, there's a huge amount to build on, progress, our record, like we're talking about the Cups. What about our record against the Big Six in the Premier League? Something which was abysmal for a decade before Arteta arrived, and now under Arteta, we've always really competed against the bigger teams. Now we're not only compete, we get the results, and we look the better team on the pitch. He also has some line about how we didn't really compete with Liverpool this year. I mean, they started hot, we had some challenges, but we did compete for a little bit. When we played them, we absolutely competed. And so, depending on what he really meant by that, if he just means across the trajectory of the Premier League this season, yeah, they pulled away and we were miles off by halfway through the season.
Yeah,
there's nuance. Look, that's what I'm saying. There's nuance.
The first thing I will say is if you engage with bad faith arguments, you'll lose. Because people making bad faith arguments aren't looking to have an intelligent debate. They're just making bad faith arguments. There is always going to be a disconnect in the way people think about success in football based on what they want, right? And based on what's going to make them happy. And telling other people what's going to make them happy doesn't work. So, Henry talks about being an Arsenal fan and seeing other clubs lift trophies, and he wants that. Everybody wants that. And I would never pretend that winning FA Cups didn't make me happy. It made me very happy. But it sort of disproves the argument about trophy winning being an indicator of success of the club overall by simply looking at the last trophy we won, the FA Cup, under this manager, with a dreadful team that needed to be pulled apart at the seams, that was nowhere in the league. No one was happy with where we were as a club at that time. The season where we fell short to Leicester, in my mind, is one of the biggest failures of this club in the last 20 years. We had a chance to win a Premier League. We failed in the January window. We wound up with a midfield that couldn't function. Giroud went historically cold. I'll give him a little wave sitting next to me in his picture frame. And we lost the league by a mile to Leicester in the season we could have won it. You know what else we did that season? We won the FA Cup. And it's like, this is the hard thing. Those things are wonderful and they're brilliant and you should win cups. But if Mikel Arteta wins us an FA Cup and a League Cup next season, wins both, and we finish fourth, 30 points off the top, and don't make it out of the league phase of the Champions League, that won't take away how much I enjoy the cup wins. But it won't make me more likely to call Mikel a success and this project a success. If anything, it'll make me more likely to call it a failure and say we might need to think about moving on, because our progress towards the things we really want to achieve will have stalled and gone backwards. And so that's why I think you have to hold two things in your mind. Hold it in your mind that it would be very fun to win a trophy, but that the way you, I think, evaluate whether the manager's on the right track, the squad's on the right track, the club is on the right track, is how you evaluate the progress towards the two things we really want, and that's a Premier League and a Champions League. And we can't have an entitlement towards those things because, oh, by the way, we've literally never won the Champions League. And we've won the Premier League 3 times and not in 21 years. So, and this is where it turns to bad faith when someone says, Spurs had a better season than Arsenal, right? Or Chelsea did. If you make enough cups, everyone gets one. Here's an interesting question for you. Did the team that finished second in the championship have a worse season than the team that won the playoff final? Well, you don't want to be in the playoff. You'd rather finish second because that gets you automatic promotion. But the playoff final is a final. You know what and that's an awesome final day to win at Wembley. You get to go to Wembley and you get to win. Would you rather that? Some people would say, yeah, that'd be more fun. But you can't say that you'd rather finish 5th in the championship than second and have to go through the playoff final. So it is tricky. If you make enough competitions, eventually everyone gets to win one. I'll tell you this much. Chelsea won the conference at a canter. I honestly think it's harder to win the Community Shield. Genuinely. So it isn't, again, I want to be clear. Every time you win a trophy, that's fun. But saying that's the goal, to win the third-rate league in Europe that you don't want to be in, where for 90% of the competition, you're literally playing players no one's ever heard of, that to me is bad faith. That to me is bad faith when you say that. So if I said to you, did Spurs have a better final day of their season than Arsenal? They sure did. No question. Did Spurs have a better season? Enjoy losing 22 times in the league? No. Are Spurs closer to being where they want to be as a club than Arsenal? No. So like I said, you can believe that winning a trophy is the goal and it's fun and you want to have that experience, and I would never take that away from you. What I don't think you can believe is that winning a trophy, whatever trophy it is indicative of whether you're closer to where you want to be as a club and as a team. And so, Paul, that's my segregation of these two ideas. The idea that, yeah, I want to win the FA Cup. I want to win the League Cup. It'd be super fun. Those would be really fun days out. But doing that will be separate from my analysis of whether Mikel and the players and the club are moving closer to the things we ultimately want. Because 10 FA Cups won't make me feel like one Champions League, with all due respect to that competition. So that's my long-winded way of saying, yes, I want cups, but I don't use them to evaluate if we are where we want to be going as a club, as a manager, as players, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, if Arteta is having a say on this, it's a bit of the emperor's got no clothes thing, where he can see the emperor's got no clothes, he can see the emperor's danglies, but you can't say it. And the thing he wants to say is, we measure ourselves on the development of this club, this squad, this project in terms of the Premier League and the Champions League. When they get together for their planning, for the summer, for their recruitment, for what they want next year, it's going to be all about progress in terms of the team, the structure, how we operate, how our departments work, so that we can have success in two competitions at the same time, the Premier League and the Champions League, and for each year to push on better. It's not just about results, but it's going to be about results in the Premier League and the Champions League. And do they see the progress? Are we becoming one of the best teams, organizations, clubs in the world? Right, that's the metric. Not did you win the FA Cup because you happen to be one of the last 8 teams standing. You suddenly took it super seriously and still weren't playing your first 11. You still gave the weekend, but you were playing your kind of strongest cup teams from there forward. It's kind of a Monte Carlo dash to your car and off to the race. Well, it's a dash for the last couple of rounds of a cup to see if you can get there. That's what the cup is. It's a nice to have. The must have, the need to have is you start the season building a stronger club, building a stronger squad, building a stronger organization to go deeper, to do better in the Premier League and Champions League, season after season till you get there. And if you get there a little early, fantastic. But each year needs to be better than the previous. And I would think in some ways Arteta can look at the Premier League himself and say, well, we've got further, we're better, we're more prepared. We didn't have the season, we didn't have the results, we didn't have the team, we didn't have the players at the critical moments. But in his mind, he will see the progress as he moves to a stronger and stronger setup going into each season. That has to be the focus for the club. I'd be very disappointed if that isn't their focus.
It's just weird. Like, how many FA Cups did Arsene Wenger? Was it 7?
Yeah, 7
it's
or 8.
something like that. 7? Yeah. 7 FA Cups? How many League Cups did he win? None.
We
made, one final? Arsene Wenger, I think it's fair to say, and I will say this on this podcast, and I'll take the bullets for it, I think he was a poor Champions League manager overall. With the talent he had in that first Invincible era, I think we underperformed. The Wayne Bridge goal in particular really hurts. But you can't say he was a bad cup manager. He won 7 FA Cups. But he was dreadful in the League Cup, and he didn't do what he should have in the Champions League. It's such a weird thing, right? Mikel Arteta has won the FA Cup and just took us to our third ever semifinal in the Champions League. And yet I think it's fair if you want to say he's had a bad cup record. What he did in the Europa League wasn't good enough. What he's done in the FA Cup and the League Cup since winning the FA Cup isn't good enough. And yet with his worst ever team, he beat City and Chelsea on his way to a FA Cup. Cups are just so weird. I mean,
can I say one word on Arsene Wenger?
Quickly, yeah.
The Premier League, the priorities of Premier League, Champions League and FA Cup have changed since his time. FA Cup was much more important at that particular time. Champions League was important, but Premier League was maybe even more important than it is right now. The Champions League has become even more all that. They've done a very good job positioning themselves. So subtle adjustments. Now, I also agree with you that he did not achieve what we should have achieved when he had the team to go deeper in the Champions League. It was a really important competition then too.
It's just also weird that 3 of the FA Cups that Arsene won were won with 3 of his weaker teams, you might say. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's such a bizarre thing. I mean, Crystal Palace won the FA Cup this season. I don't think anyone thinks Crystal Palace is a titan in the Premier League. And this is why it can be really weird. Let's say Simone Inzaghi on Saturday, the game goes to penalties. And there's 1 penalty kick they need. And if it goes in, they win the Champions League. And it goes in. Simone Inzaghi is the best manager in the world. If it doesn't go in, and then help me. Inter versus PSG, and then PSG score theirs. Yeah, blanked it out, right? It doesn't go in, and then PSG score theirs. Inzaghi suddenly is what, a worse manager than Ange Postecoglou because he didn't win anything. So it can't be today. You're one of the best clubs in the world and you're one of the best managers in the world, but tomorrow, if the result goes badly, you're now a bum. So look, it just puts it all in context for me, which is simply this. Winning trophies, and we know because we've experienced it over the years, is the most fun thing in football, and you want it. But it is not always the indicator of whether you're heading in the direction to win the biggest trophies. And so, yes, I am frustrated we didn't win a trophy this season or last season or the season before. I am not going to say that that's indicative that we're headed in the wrong direction. But we'll see. I think everybody agrees it's a pivotal summer. And I am sure there's going to be all the usual, this is a season Arsenal must get a trophy. But again, to the point I made earlier, if we win the League Cup this season, finish 4th, 30 points off first, and don't make it out of the league phase of the Champions League, I have this weird feeling that despite winning a trophy, all the people who said winning a trophy was paramount will suddenly say we're going the wrong direction and we need a change. And the irony is, I might agree with them if the season plays out that way. So we'll see. But I think the trophy discourse is a bit tedious, and I said we're not going to engage with bad faith arguments, but it is the case that you don't want to tell fans how to fan. I love winning trophies. There are 2 I want more than others. Let's leave it there. We're going to do the Director of Football pod tomorrow. We'll probably touch on the Champions League final a little bit with Clive as well. We'll have Transfer Daily starting in June. Lots of good stuff coming up, so stay with us for that. Paul, thank you very much.
Woohoo!
My name's Elliot Smith. We love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Transfer Window 0.